Thank you. I feel so incredibly lucky that I get to do the Literarian. It's a pleasure to be here doing it. We are on our 5th issue. We're now settled into a regular schedule where we come out kind of the first week every other month. We have been blessed with wonderful contributors, and you have some flyers that give you some information about the Literarian, what we're doing, what we're up to. I know a couple of our past contributors. Barbara O'Dare is here, Therese Swoboda is here. There may be other people, if I can't see you, I hope future contributors are here. And I just want to point out a few things in the issue. We have 3 of our writers are here this evening, but I hope you go online and look at the Literarian. We have Roddy Doyle on the book that made him a reader. We have Margaret Atwood on Wonder Tales. Steve Almond on big publishing, small press publishing, indie publishing, and the cure for the book review. Ed Park's favorite sci-fi picks, and we also have fiction by David Krause, who is in Alaska, and Dagoberto Gilb, who's in Austin. Tonight we're very, very lucky to have 3 readers with us. Tracy O'Neill is reading first. This is her first published story that came straight out of the submission inbox, and it was one of those things that makes you suddenly just stop and wake up, and it's the reason why anybody wants to be an editor. So I'm thrilled to welcome Tracy O'Neill. And you're getting cards.
Okay, so this is a story called The Imperfect. I meant to buy a gift on discount, but the coupon expired before I wasn't hungover anymore. My girl Jolene read somewhere that a man's relationship with his mother shows which black and white movie star he is like. I think she wanted a Jimmy Stewart, but all I wanted was to remind my mother that I'm good for more than bedbugs, which is what she got for Mother's Day 3 years ago when I gave her a wooden bench that I found on a curbside. 18 months, my mother told me. That's how long they can lay dormant without feeding. Then she put our pillows in the oven. The exterminator told her that 125 degrees would bake the life out of them, so she set the oven to 250. This time would be different, I thought, because I could afford a present from somewhere besides the curb. I now have a job at a medical clinic down the street from my mother's house, where I am a telephone representative. That's why they call it the Silent Std, I tell callers time and time again, because there are no symptoms. Most of the callers want to know how it happened to them, whether it is a disease or burgeoning life. For all but the life starters and the life enders, a round of prescription medication can be obtained at the clinic. I advise people to carry prophylactics at all times because I see the things for which there is no cure yet. Sometimes the responsible thing these kids should know is not to become a responsible party to human life. I have quit more jobs than I can enumerate. Construction worker, ice cream scooper, rock star, too hot, too cold, just not right. My guitar teacher told me a lot of people go through this phase. What phase? I had to ask. The phase where you can't do anything with the guitar. I quit a job shucking oysters for this, I said, nudging him in the arm. But the guy just frowned and said I should have asked. He would have told me not to quit my day job. The truth of the matter is, it was too late for me to be a prodigy. I was starting out at the age when Mozart composed Ida Mineo. Forget starting salary, my mother said later, and ask, are you gainlessly or gainfully employed? From there, you can go to anything. So I put down the guitar, and now I try to keep sex gainless for helpline callers. Besides condoms, mostly what we get in the mail at the clinic is apparel from Democrats, but I let the others fight over the size medium shirts. My shoulders make a skinny showing, and anyway, there is only one registered voter in our household. It used to be the same political argument at our Independence Day party year after year. Usually, her old friends from the music department averted their eyes and tried to concentrate on their own conversations about the allocation of the university endowment, Charles Mingus, atonal theory. Or there was last year when Jolene, for perhaps the only time in her life, failed heroically to capture a room with stories of her father's Confederate flag collection, rendered in the sticky languor of that Southern Belle drawl. It's just accepting the lesser of two evils, I told my mother, and the guests spoke louder out of courtesy. So pick your poison, she said, throwing large, veined hands in the air. By the time we got to laissez-faire, I'd reached twice over the card table behind her to help myself to more punch. After the party, I shuffled around the house with a trash bag, picking up empty red, white, and blue cups. But in that dark refuse of the day, all I wanted was to wake up again. So I covered myself with a blanket on the couch and sipped from a flask lying prone, and Jolene went home. My mother wandered in, told me she didn't know what to do with me. That makes two of us, I said. A week ago, I tried to buy my mother a present, but all I ended up with was a rash. The store claimed to sell 45 different scented candles, which altogether is one big reason for antihistamines. California Sunset, Midnight Stroll, Autumn Crush, all these wax fragrances intimating the rhetoric of personal ads drove me to another wing of the mall. Past novelty stores and lingerie boutiques, after a cheap salon and furniture emporium, I found the familiar gray fluorescence of a chain drugstore. I searched for the easy-to-swallow caplets, and when it was my turn to check out, a boy wearing a name tag asked if I was picking up for my mother. He said he wanted to thank her for getting him and his girlfriend together. "Who are you?" I asked, scratching my arms. "Frank," he said, and pointed to his name tag. "Your mom told me to shit or get off the pot before it was too late. I've seen you in here picking up her prescriptions before. It must be great to have a mother like Cheryl." "I owe her my life," I said. At a payphone outside the pharmacy, I called Jolene to explain the holdup, and she said, with an excuse that's stupid, my dog had better be shitting homework. When I arrived at the second-run movie theater, she had been waiting in the lobby 45 minutes, and since going to the pharmacy, my rash had cleared. It was true I always seemed to be running late from some appointment or spat with my mother, but Jolene wouldn't even look at me, and I was beginning to think it wasn't better late than never. "He's telling me he's allergic to shopping," she told the girl behind the movie ticket booth. "Typical," the girl said, shaking her head and refunding Jolene a 20. "Just for the record, it was candles," I said into the window microphone piece. The girl snapped her bubble gum. Jolene was already walking out the door to the parking lot. I ran ahead, crouched behind the car, and ducked my head up from behind the truck, waving the pharmacy receipt like a flag. I surrendered, but couldn't even rack up a smile. So I told her she was prettier than a dirty picture show, and cartwheeled. I leapt in an incompetent straddle, chanted that she put the love in "if the glove fits, you must acquit." And all of it was sincere. We didn't used to be like this. At restaurants, when she's gone to the bathroom, I have smelled that girl's dirty napkins. She had me the first time she touched my scalp. "Back again?" she asked when I returned for a trim, 2, then 4, then 6 days later. I could have joined the military service by the time I managed to see her outside the salon, if I could make it through basic anyway. Holding my arm out like the neck of a guitar and riffing against my stomach, I told her she plucked my heartstrings. Jolene sighed. "So what did you end up getting her?" she asked. "I don't have anything for her yet," I admitted, and she touched my hand. "It's going to be okay. You'll find something," Jolene said. Against the horizon, the sky sunk from pink to black. I asked if we could go to her house, where we could lie still, not living up to anything or living the stakes down. She rubbed my head. "As long as this romance will never be candlelit," she said. If they were fair at all, they'd say, "all you can fit." Instead, they say, "all you can eat," and give small plates. An obfuscation, not a lie, is what my father called the sign. That word was also his justification to my mother when she caught him not on a business trip during her pregnancy. We were at the buffet, so we wouldn't have to agree on what to eat. It had been a problem each year when he saw me for my birthday. From aluminum trays, he chose the foods that would keep him celebrating birthdays. I chose the ones that looked like they included chicken. He nodded his head towards a table with a booth resembling a bowling alley bench, and when we sat down, I told him about the doctor's appointment the next day. If people would stop desecrating their bodies with saturated fat, they would reduce their medical expenses by half, my father said, slicing cold tomatoes. You only get one body to do what you will. This is something your mother never understood. I gave him a look. Don't get me wrong, he said, as though I was the one calling lies obfuscations, and he began speaking of my mother as though she were dead. She used to dream of touring across Europe. She used to spray champagne on the crowd when she performed. She used to say, what promise you have. The more he spoke in the imperfect, the more I thought of Ella Fitzgerald, of her song my mother used to sing while she cleaned the house. You used to do, I'm so lonely, every road I walk along with you. I thought for years the lyric was, I walk alone with you. A girl who looked to be a year or two younger than me, maybe the same age as Jolene, came to refill water in our glasses and slid a lemon slice on each. They were garnishes too thin to squeeze, and I put mine on a napkin. You two must be brothers, she giggled. My father sucked a lemon sliver graphically, looked up, and winked. I looked down at my buffet slop chicken. Never had I thought this would be the lesser of two evils. He's old enough to be a father, I said finally, still holding a speared cube of chicken. And this is a reality I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. So I don't have time to finish this actually, but you can finish it if you would like at centerforfiction.org/magazine. So thanks guys.
Will Boast is the author of Power Ballads. His book just came out. It's the Iowa Prize winner. Will is not only a brilliant writer, but a very talented musician, and all of the stories in this book are about the lives of musicians. We are very, very lucky to have published the title story. The book is for sale after the reading. And I just found with this story, I just wanted to stay in this world of musicians and clubs and performance and desire and never leave. So here's Will Boast.
Yeah, I was like, it's possible to stalk a website, but I've been like stalking the Center for Fiction website for, you know, a few months now, and just seeing all these like really cool events that, you know, just like 2 a week, you know, that I wanted to come see. So it's pretty cool to be here reading, and I'm really just yeah, so happy to see so many friends here, and some of them are amazing musicians that I'd like to introduce to one another, and there's amazing writers that I'd like to introduce to one another. So come say hi after the reading, and let's hang out. Yeah, the book just came out like a couple weeks ago, and I'm really happy that to have Dawn have the title story for the magazine. So I'm gonna read just like a short section. I think all you need to know is that the narrator in this story is a guy who went to school to study jazz and to be a professional musician, and then gets into that world and finds out very quickly that he's not going to pay rent, no way, no chance in hell, by playing jazz. So he has to take sort of every job under the sun to eke out a living. So here he's just read like a flyer in a music store, and it's this band that's trying to make a comeback. In the middle of this, you'll hear a little intrusion from his girlfriend, who he's telling the story to. So just to put it in context. I remembered them, barely. A last gasp 80s band that lingered into the 90s like a stubborn stain before being erased by grunge and alternative. Soldier, they were called. The kind of stuff that mechanics and construction workers cranked before Bears games. The rule of the day back when quarterbacks wore their hair long. They'd had a minor hit somewhere towards the end. One of those lumbering, hard-on-sleeve ballad turns, that traded on working class pride and memories of a girl lost to the ravages of war. DMZ of Love, the song is called. I'm a serious writer, I think, but I wrote that line. My dad was a child of the 70s, but that song always got him. He used to turn it up whenever it came on WKIS. Only one tab on the flyer was torn off. The tab the poster had torn off, of course. No one in the city was clamoring for the return of Soldier. The city had gone post-avant everything. No one even wanted to think about bands like Soldier. It was just too embarrassing. Maybe I called the number out of some perverse curiosity. Maybe it was because I remembered my dad humming tunelessly along to the guitar solo in DMZ. Maybe it was just those two beautiful words at the end of the flyer. Got gigs. We jammed for the first time in Billy's garage down in Blue Island. I felt good, calm, collected, in control. "You've done your homework, kid," Billy said after the first couple songs. "Not bad." I'd found 3 of their albums in the used bin of a record shop. Hard-driving, heavy blues rock with the shuffle straightened out. Lots of 16th note fills and an odd bar thrown in here and there. Grist for the practice room mill. Otherwise, plenty of lead guitar, lots of shrieking and double entendres, Catholic guilt and Catholic terror, and pre-adolescent lizard brain boner jokes. This music had pogoed back and forth between the American suburbs and the steel town of northern England so much it had become almost a continent of its own. Its citizens loyal, unbathed, and still not convinced the singer from Judas Priest was actually gay. We played a few more rockers, then Billy ended the audition. "Hang out a while, kid. Drink a few brews." He popped me a can of Bud Light Ice. It was all they drank. Billy, Carlos, and Arn. They'd formed Soldier back in high school. 30 years later, and 3 beer guts later, they decided to mount a counterattack against aging gracefully. "The 3 of us are going to step out for a minute and confer," Billy said. When they came back in, I could tell they were excited. They were playing it cool, but I could tell. They tried out a handful of drummers over the last 6 months, but I was the first one, Billy said, who brought some respect to their music. He popped another round of buds. I couldn't help myself. I stayed and got drunk. We jammed till the neighbors called the cops. Those old dudes could wail. They were exact, reverent. They were like their own tribute band. Loading up my drums at the end of the night, I couldn't remember when I'd had this kind of dumb fun. "Tim," Billy said, pushing a bag of clothes into my arms. "Here you go." Inside was a set of olive green fatigues. "What's this?" "Your infantry kid," a grunt. "Welcome to the band." "This is the girlfriend." "You had a costume?" "Well, that's why they were Soldier." Carlos had an Air Force flight suit and mirrored shades. Arn wore navy dress whites and a doughboy cap. And Billy was the samurai. He had a belted robe, rope sandals, his hair back in a ponytail. He played a flying V he'd had customized back in '85 to look like a katana sword. He was Japanese-American, I explained. On stage he went by his mother's maiden name. "Jesus Christ, you're describing the Village People." "Well, no, I mean, this was serious. Soldier was mostly serious, so it made them great. A straight face was the only way they could pull it off." Before our first gig, a few full band rehearsals, and a lot of time woodshedding the songs by myself. Billy had some old contacts among the local promoters. We were booked at Champs in the far suburbs, down where Chicagoland begins to exasperate with its concrete ceaselessness. The place was a cavern, eclipsed only by the Six Flags Over Jesus megachurch down the strip, and the old packing plant that squatted in abandonment across the tracks. I was used to dim little coffee shops where skinny dudes sat stroking goatees and uttering the occasional soft, "oh," of approval at the end of, you ever seen jazz? They always do that. At the end of solos. A sound that always made me think of them tangled up sweating in bed with their stick-legged asthmatic girlfriends. The crowd at Champs, and Jesus, there was a crowd, were Southsiders, that particular strain of Midwesterner whose Polish or Irish blood has thinned to an obscure murmur in the veins that requires them to eat pierogi or corned beef and cabbage once a year and migrate in droves. But as I looked around, it wasn't just white dudes, some pudgy Mexican guys, a cluster of Asian cats, friends of Carlos and Billy, I guessed, or maybe Buttrock as simply the great blue-collar leveler. Hell, there were even some women in the audience. At the bar, they stood toying with their hoop earrings and spritzed curls, smoking Slims. The smell of menthol filled the room, and 20 years melted away. On a dim, big-screen TV, Jim McMahon floated a winning pass to Willie Gault, and the world champion Bears did the Super Bowl shuffle. The lights went down. A spot swept across the stage and came to rest where the four of us stood in staggered silhouette, me struggling to keep from falling to one knee. In place of the flag, we raised Billy's katana/guitar. Oh God, Kate said. Like the Iwo Jima Memorial? Well, that was the idea anyway. The crowd thundered, hoots, hollers, and plenty of catcalls. We broke formation, and Billy dived into the riff to Iron Curtain. I beat hell out of my drums, 4 long years of studied restraint erased in the rush of vicarious nostalgia. Billy had made me get a buzz cut, and sweat poured down my face. My helmet kept slipping down over my eyes, and my fatigues, which were a size too small, cut me under the pits. But I was delirious, grinning stupidly, ready to burst out laughing the whole hour and a half. At the end of the night, Billy put $500 in my hand. "Comeback City," he drawled in his thick Southside accent. He knocked a cool out of a soft pack, dangled it under his upper lip. The night had gone as well as anyone could have hoped, though I'd seen him pacing in the alley before the crowd started arriving. "That's some good playing tonight, kid. You're a real quick learner." He reached back and let down his ponytail. His thick, dark hair framed his face and spread over his shoulders. He suddenly resembled the guy on the cover of those old albums, fleshly handsome, dissolute, intimidating. Now all we gotta work on is DMZ. Why, what's wrong with it? It's like the easiest song in the book. He sucked his cool down to the filter, looked at me calmly, but impatiently. "That's the one they're waiting to hear, ain't it? Couldn't you see it out there? See them waiting?" Someone came up and asked him to sign a copy of Battle of the Bulge, their first album. He whipped off an autograph, sent the guy away with a silent nod. In front of the fans, he never broke character. He was inscrutable, stoic, depthless. He was the samurai. You'd never have known that by day he did tax preparation. That's the song Gotta Connect. That's the one gotta hit. It's a power ballad. You know what that means, don't you? It wasn't exactly on the curriculum of music history. Sure, I know what you're talking about. Sensitive acoustic strumming and lardy fat backbeats. Falsetto harmonies. Hammer-on drenched guitar solos soaring like Icarus with his wings dripping off. The power ballad was the part of the show when, for some reason, everyone but the drummer sat on high stools. I pictured a darkened arena, 50,000 lighters held aloft, bobbing up and down on an ocean of schlock. "My dad used to love DMZ," I said. "Shit. You write 100 songs and that's the one they all remember." He said it for the sake of appearances. He wasn't bitter about being a one-hit wonder. He played all of his songs with pop-eyed urgency, legs spread wide, lips glued to the mic. But for DMZ, he bowed his head and submitted, as if the music were coming through him and he was simply the conduit, the sluice, the terrestrial receiver. 100 to 1. Those aren't bad odds when you think about it, I said. A lot better than some guys do. He inserted another smoke under his lip. "So, how's this going? Is it a good fit for you? Playing with 3 old guys like us?" I hesitated. This was the moment to bow out. No hard feelings. I thought of the cash in my pocket. "I'm having a blast," I said. He clapped me on the shoulder and I felt his gratitude and his approval shiver up and down my spine. "No point if you ain't having fun," he said. I was giving him what he wanted, wasn't I? A little taste of former glory, a short, stiff dram of the stuff that tells us we can go on forever. Billy ordered shots, and we raised them up. He winced as he took his down.
Thank you. And our final is Sandra Novack, whose new book, Everyone But You, was published like yesterday or this week. It's her second book and a verse collection. I've never met Sandra Novack before, but I would have to say she's got a huge, huge heart. The story in the Literarian, I love the precision that she writes about childhood, and I've rarely seen anybody who writes so convincingly about going into hard places and coming out on the side of faith. I know you're reading a different story from the book tonight, but the story in the Literarian is called Morty El Morto, and I want you to go check that one out too.
So yeah, I'm going to be reading from my second book, which is a collection. And it was interesting going back to this work because a lot of the stories were a little older and were written before my first novel. So it was interesting to go back and a lot of fun to see what types of things I was thinking about in those days. And the best that I can sort of surmise is I was very interested in insanity, deviant sex, pyromania, and cows, and sometimes put that all in the same story. So it really gave me pause that I was so interested in characters that were completely on the edge. But sexual deviance and cows aside, I think that probably most of the stories in Everyone But You are love stories and deal with the disruption of love and the reimagining of it and the reclaiming of love. So I really consider them love stories for modern times. And actually, I think I was going to read something funny, but it was so damn long. And it started to feel like I was in David Sedaris's like Holidays on Ice. It just kept going, and we had time constraints tonight. So I actually am going to pick a story called Rilke, and it's told in a pseudo-confessional mode with a woman and a man in bed and a woman who just talks. So that's a basic setup for you guys. Although I am preoccupied with words, I cannot say what I want. Once, when traveling in a foreign country, I negotiated my desire while lying naked on a bed, legs up in the air, toes gripping the flesh of a stranger's shoulders. And when this man asked me, in between wet, jaunty kisses, what I wanted, all I could say was nothing at all, and not take your time, will you please, which is what I actually thought. I do not remember this man's name. I'm not certain I ever knew his name. But his small, dingy apartment smelled of smoke, and his body felt sinewy, racehorse lean, moist with sweat. His hair fell across my shoulders as he moved. He spoke of things I dare not say, and some of which, truthfully, I did not understand. When we finished, I grabbed my purse and buttoned up my blouse, slipped on my jeans, and stole a pack of cigarettes from his shirt pocket. I quoted Rilke, not in French but in German, and said, "We are never at home in our interpreted worlds." And the man, this stranger, lay back in bed, blew me a kiss with his cupped hand, and whispered in a smooth, soft voice, "Fetja." I do not believe that French is the language of desire. I am unsure about German, though I confess that, like Rilke, I believe that if I cried out, no one would hear, that I would only be reminded of my own divisions. English is no better. Always I must approximate. Back home in the States, I once dated a man who was 43, 22 years older than I was then. This man never said, "I loved you," though it's true he did have a cat and a mother, so he may have been lying. Perhaps he simply did not say everything there was to say. I gave him pet names, Peanut Butter and Honey Pie and Bear, because everything about him was thick. But most of the time, I just called him Bash, a shortening of his Lebanese name, Bashir. I called his cat Kitty because that was the cat's name. I never met his mother and so did not know her name. Bash usually called late at night, not because he wanted to talk dirty, but because he wanted to discuss philosophy. After midnight, he became extremely lucid and could speak in the most straightforward manner about Husserl and Hegel. He could breathe in the body politic phenomenology. He quoted Buber's Ich und Du, which he struggled to read in poor, broken German until finally he gave up to read in English instead. When he spoke, his voice put me to sleep because he spoke in whispers. I do not think Buber has been translated to Arabic. Bosch called me cutie and took me out for ice cream and walks late at night under the moon. When he and I kissed, our glasses knocked together, and I shook beneath his hands as if everything within me were imploding. Take the advice of the Marquis de Sade, he once said while we lay in bed, arms folded around each other, sheets twisted between our legs. Don't ever have children. He told me that at 21 I was already very frightening. He asked if, like Sade's female philosopher monsters, I preferred an alternative kind of sex. What a pickup line, I told him. Afterward, he said it would probably be better if I remained single as well. I never quoted from Rilke because Bosch thought all poets possessed feeble minds. I told him that of all the poets, Rilke was the hardest to pin down, born in Prague, raised in a German-speaking neighborhood, offended to be called a German and an Austrian, both in equal parts. I spoke of his soldier father, the destruction of his homeland in war, his time in Paris with Rodin. Rilke, I said, never felt himself a native anywhere. He was his own country, body, mind, and heart. In his Duino elegies, I said, Rilke spoke intimately with his readers as if in a whispery confession and tried to overcome distance. Bosch asked me why anyone would ever do that. I wrote him a poem, but never sent it. Once, after we'd taken a shower, Bosch wrapped his arms around my waist and asked what I wanted from life, but there was too much then to say. We stood in front of a foggy mirror, his chest hairs wet against my back, steam everywhere. He bit my neck. With my pinky, I penned on the mirror what I wanted, not sex, but love. And when he pulled away from me, I told him I was only joking. I tried to laugh, but felt unearthly and foolish. Sometimes, when I see the moon, and it's low, and it's full of itself in quiet ways, I still think of him. Speaking of the moon, a word here about our alien natures. It is a widely regarded belief that mathematics, and not words, are the universal language. Do you know what desire translates to in math? Would Rilke know? When I married my husband, he plotted our spending habits on charts month by month, line by line, until a grid became full. He said he wanted to see what we were worth. When I laughed, he didn't understand what I thought was funny. I'm not exactly telling you the truth about him because my husband was not technically a mathematician. Actually, he counted timelines on 500-million-year-old fossils, Olenellus in Cambrian rock. He entered all these numbers in a database and performed statistical calculations about extinction rates. When I first met him in a library and he told me this, it made me horny. I said I didn't believe anything could last that long, and I asked him to bed. We had sex among fossils because he worked in the collections and had a key. My husband wore boxers with symbols of pi r squared on them that glowed in the dark. He bought the boxers from the Gap. The Gap has a sense of humor about things. He was so sweet when he smiled. I knew I could devour him like chocolate, bite by bite. I called him my angel. I wanted to carry his skin on mine as a soldier carries a flag, announcing himself to others. Once, during a rainy night, he said he would give me anything I wanted, but at the time I couldn't think of one thing I could actually keep. He said, let's stay together till we die. I quoted to him and said, every angel is terrifying. I read him all of Rilke's elegies in bed before we slept at night. I said, beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror. He said, poetry sounds beautiful, but I just don't understand it. I told him I don't understand how to calculate time and the Earth's history on a one-dimensional line from beginning to end. We washed dishes together, cooked meals. With him I became so full I gained weight. He read articles while I graded papers on Baudelaire's Le Fleur de Mal. We turned off the lights at the same time each and every night. After 10 years, things became so quiet, I developed a predilection for the future. When we gazed at rocks and mountains, I could hear the smallest cracking and knew that neither the mountain nor I could do anything about this fact. I didn't know how to describe the sound of erosion in a way that my husband believed, but I still marveled over fossils. For a long time, that was all we could talk about. Finally, I said, "Are we any less subject to time than rock is?" He said he didn't understand the question. "People aren't mountains," he said. When I left, my husband said that he was better at loving, though when he said this, it didn't sound childish, it only sounded like a statement of fact. Last I heard, he'd married an actuary. She computes insurance risks and premiums. I can only hope they are happy. Sometimes I wonder what she thinks when she sees his boxers from the Gap. I'm sure he hasn't gotten rid of them. He never gets rid of anything, even things that are old. This is getting old, you say now. We are in bed together, and I can't tell if you're angry or joking, though I've seen you naked and felt you pressing between my legs, so I feel as though I should know. If you're going to talk like this every time I ask you what you want, you say, I may have to reconsider sleeping with you again. Then you add, I was really just asking what you wanted to eat. I always get a little hungry after sex. You're a good lover with strong, nimble fingers. And it's true, I suppose, that you are still hungry. You rub your belly, lie back, adjust the pillow. You stare at the ceiling fan which swirls above us. Rain hits the window. I've seen the sky tonight, a shattered pearl gray. I want to say, you are a sweet man, even though you are hard, emotionally balled up like a fist. I want to say you have the most lovely, milky brown eyes, and your skin is warm and heavy. I sit up, lean over, and kiss your stomach instead. It's true, I tell you, I said too much. Should we fix a snack? Not now, you say. Now you've ruined it. Now I'm only tired. It is tiring, I agree, all this history and desire. I could die while listening to you, you say. I've aged 20 years since you've started. I'm really glad you didn't start at the beginning or go on about all the men you slept with. That's true, I say. There's a lot I left out. I want to tell you that, as with the foreign man, we are still strangers. And as with my Lebanese man, I have no way to know if I reach you. And unlike my ex-husband's charts, there is no good way to measure the distance between us at all. Instead, I ask, why did you let me talk for so long? I dozed off, you confess. I remember the French guy and war and also something about the Marquis de Sade. Oh good, I say, leaning back on my pillow. Those were all the best parts. Maybe I can listen when you can say what you want in one sentence or less, you tell me. Really, you need to make things simpler. I pull up the blanket and turn to face you. I cover your leg with my leg. Truthfully, my wants are so large that I can't fit words around them. I want to tell you I feel lonely. I want to ask if, on rainy nights, you are ever moved to speak the language of the poets. But mostly, I want to feel proximity of body, mind, and heart. I want, like Rilke, to cover the terrible nakedness in you and in me, to cast the emptiness out of us and into the open spaces. Perhaps Rilke was wrong. I cannot ask you this. You teach history and speak frequently of soldiers, countries, and war. Do soldiers, away from their homeland, carry flags, I ask instead? You scoff at this and shift under the covers. Only if they're insane, you say. Only if they want to get shot. It's frustrating to be without a home or a country. Not really, you say, as you strip off the covers and get up to make a snack. There are always borders and oppositions. Sometimes, you tell me, it's easier to remain quiet and say nothing at all.